Hello, family. I'm Janaya Future Khan, and this is Dark Woke. Just before we hit it, I want to say thank you to all the listeners out there, and a special shout out to the supporters who make this show possible. It truly means the world to me. If you'd like to become a member, our Patreon is linked in the episode right up below. Hello, babies. I came on to this and I sat down and I said, this is going to be an episode on reconstruction. Because we have to talk about race and then we have to never stop talking about race again. But then I just couldn't get over the fact that how we've done it is so bad. It's so bad. So yes, we're going to be catching up on all the things with Minneapolis and what's happening with ICE. But what we do on this show is different. We do a lot of scaffolding. We do deep work. And yesterday's episode brought up a lot of things for me around expertise and our sort of disrespect for it and the power of sincerity and how we've sort of eliminated that as a practice on the left. It's really about presenting this very singular identity where we're not nuanced and everything has to be clean and perfectly said, lest the mob come after you. And so we will be talking about reconstruction on a later episode because it matters in every way. But specifically, right, ICE is the arm of DHS, right, the Department of Homeland Security. So much of what this white nationalist movement and administration is obsessed with is, this idea of homeland, which actually isn't even really a part of the American lexicon, but it's what they're tapping into. And why reconstruction matters in every way, beyond the fact that, everything that was promised to Black folks was an absolute lie. But if you really look at that period of time, right, with Reconstruction, the thesis of it was who got to be an American citizen. And that has everything to do with this moment. It is not overestimation. It's not an overstatement when we say that all of this stems from racism, which I hate, as you know. Like, it's so annoying to be Black and have to talk about this because the nignogs out there, we have not done a good job of talking about race. And as you know, I have notes for everybody. But again, rather than go off on tangents, which I'm sorry, there's going to be a few because I'm working things out and I would like you to essentially be on a thought experiment with me. So this is going to be a little bit more disjointed. It's going to be more anecdotal. I have stories. But I'm trying to figure out some things, and I would like you to do that with me. Because what I've learned, and again, huge proponent of expertise. And so the people that I look to are the experts, and the people that I read and I study under and I ask questions of are the experts. Like, Noam Chomsky was someone he responded to like every email that was ever sent out. But I'm going to tell you some stories and also some musings, and then there's going to be some rants in this. But all of it is trying to troubleshoot and problem solve for this thing of race. I really don't like anyone who's been sort of the leader, right? I did not like Kenny Ibrahim, Stamped from the Beginning. I didn't like that work. But I thought, and by the way, just because I don't like it doesn't mean it's not good. Like, I read it and I appreciated that it was accessible. But it wasn't interesting to me in a particular way. And he wasn't interesting to me because there wasn't, again, the tradition there. And white people loved it. And I'm always suspicious of that. Because I'm like, something's not there. Something's not there that should be there. At the same time, right? The buy-in, right? Like I really like Ijoma Alow as a person, but I don't care for her body of work or her positions because, again, I don't see the same kind of tradition. The people that I've observed drawn to her style are white women who want to be abused. Not by her, by the way, just by the idea that racism exists, which we in a tradition don't have a tolerance for. And this isn't just, anecdotal, like we've sat on panels together. And again, but like nothing is personal. And I really need you to hear that. If something is personal, the problem is going to be a couple of things. I'm going to tell you that it is. And what I'm clear about is my position is that is not anywhere near this work shouldn't be out there. I believe the work is being out there is fine. There just needs to be more work and different kinds. And there's a lot of reasons why that's not the case. But I'm going to be a little bit more, stuttery perhaps, or there's going to be more pauses. I obviously have a couple of references, pulls, from online to demonstrate what normal white people talking about race looks like. But I think what I want to say, and there's a couple of things, right? So first and foremost, we talked about sincerity yesterday. We talked about expertise. And I've been thinking about something. Do you remember a time, right? What I mean when I say expertise and knowledge as opposed to information, right? And what each does to us. Right now, we're inundated with information that is disjointed from most things. Most of it is doom and gloom. Knowledge doesn't feel that way. Do you remember when you first were learning something massive? It probably was racism, because that's the deepest body of work, which, by the way, is going to come up later. But I want you to think about it. I want you to think about the time when you were awakened, right? You saw things with a longer view. And then, right, somewhere in that period of time, somebody said something stupid, right, or bigoted or racist, and everything you knew slammed against the front of your head. Everything, right? And you were just you almost were rendered or were nonverbal, because at what point of history are you supposed to tell this idiot about themselves, right? And it doesn't matter if they meant it maliciously or not, but there was a sense of weight. When's the last time you felt that, right? I don't feel that off the internet. There's not a single thing that's made me feel that, because it's disjointed. Knowledge is empowering because it's connected to meaning and purpose. There's a sense of connectivity because it's dealing in theory, right? We're getting information, just a random slew of information, not connected to theory, not connected to a belief system, not connected to tradition. And that made me think more about how race has been talked about and thought about. And if you know me, you know a couple of things, right? I hate identitarianism. I think it's the stupidest thing. I have a very strong sense of a power analysis. You know that I have an intolerance for political correctness. And you know that I value expertise. You know these things. What I'm actually describing is called a Black sensibility. And if you listen to this show and you indulge me by allowing me to entertain you, or teach you about a thing or two, or I learn just as much from you, and what speaks to you and what doesn't. You're actually developing a Black sensibility. Black folks already have it. But you're developing it. You haven't agreed with everything I said. You don't agree with every single thing that I've said or thought, but you've thought about it. You've considered it. Even though I may say things that even might offend some of you, you have a tolerance for it because there's trust, and because we're not perfect people, and because you know that I'm trying. There's a diligence there that if I mess up, I'm going to do my best to repair that. That's a Black sensibility, right? We're not dealing with a Black sensibility in America, but we're also not dealing with a Black sensibility across the left. One of the things that disquieted my spirit after George Floyd was murdered was who was telling people what to do, right? It was a lot of biracials. Sip of water. The sip of water wasn't on purpose for this, but it actually works for timing. And they were telling, their primary thing was, and they had huge followings, most of them, and they were telling white people what they should be doing. You should be out there risking your lives. And I was like, for what? Eartha Kitt, for what? For what? I was like, for what? Why would we tell people this? And the people who were telling folks this were not bound by any tradition. I didn't know them by then. I'd been organizing, and you know, it's a small world, the activist world, the real one, and the Black activist world is even smaller. Point is, I know most people from a particular generation within like 3 degrees of separation. Basically, I should know people who know you. I didn't know any of these people, and it annoyed me. So I started to yap, and for whatever reason, people heard me. I think it was largely because of the sincerity. But there's been a word that has plagued me before, then, and after. It was actually one of the first things that I went quote unquote viral for, much to my chagrin. Is that chagrin? Is that how you say that word? I practiced it because I definitely wasn't saying it right. I've hated the term privilege. I hate the term privilege. I hate how it's been used. I hate that it's an entry point. It's not useful because it relied on so many assumptions. And again, it would reduce the power analysis, right? It's racism turned into cultural appropriation, right? White supremacy turned into privilege. Patriarchy turned into toxic masculinity. I saw it in the tradition of that, but when it started to gain traction, I was in university, and I saw how my peers, these white kids, reacted to it, and it was always very silly. They were just like, "I'm, no, my story, and you don't know me, and I'm 32% Irish and 12%, Polish and 1% skim milk." Like, they just went off, and even then, I wasn't like, "What is wrong with these foolish, fragile little lambs?" I was like, anyone who feels like their story of self or the things that they've been through are reduced or minimized are going to respond badly. As a communicator, it wasn't one then, some of you know, like I couldn't make eye contact with people. I couldn't talk to people for most of my childhood into my teenage years. I really struggled. I was a bit feral, and it took a long time. So language was really important to me. I spent a long time thinking about it. And trying to understand other people, because I may, as some of you know, and it'll be in the book when it comes out, but one of the rules that I made for myself was beware the narcissism of sorrow. Yeah, I had a pretty extreme life relative to everyone I knew. I went, most of my peers in high school, were a little like coming from the hood or the little trenches too. And even then, my circumstances were kind of rough, but then everybody's was. And sorrow wasn't a measurable thing. And I realized that I could have the most, sorrow, but it just made me alone. And so I became a listener and a watcher. And I think that's partly why I responded that way, but it wasn't a useful tool. That was clear to me then. And so all these years later, I'm an organizer. I've traveled the world. For crises, for education, I'll deliver a little speech at SOAS. And then, before you know it, I'm in Standing Rock. And then before you know it, I'm in, Colombia for a workers' strike in Buenaventura. The stories go on. And we didn't give a fuck about privilege when shit was going on. No one was like, wait, are you this? Wait, are you that? I want to go back to, the episode where I where I introduced what I believe is kind of like a blueprint for 21st century organizing, right? Where we traded policy for pronouns, organizing for orthodoxy, right? It really became about the enforcement and the policing of language. So that is the crux of what is causing all of this. So don't forget that. But again, this is the grappling. I just never saw privilege as a useful thing. And I still don't. But, what came out of it, we got stamped from the beginning, and, so you want to talk about race, but what blew up, right? Those 2 books were up there on the list, but what was crushing was Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, which I always thought was a piece of shit work. And I still do. But I didn't immediately disqualify it. It's again, what tradition are people coming from? You know, everybody felt some kind of way that Tim Wise was embraced when he talked about race. He's a professor, but Kimberly Crenshaw fucks with him. He's got a scathing POV, right? When it comes to it, he doesn't pull back punches. And he's not responsible for the fact that white people want to hear white people talk about race rather than listening to Black people talk about race, which is something I'm gonna interrogate, by the way. And the unhinged is coming. It's coming. But I'm working through this as we talk. And so, that didn't bother me because Tim Wise was part of a tradition. Black professors knew him. He had relationships to Black people that were meaningful. Robin DiAngelo had one experience and then started to do a workshop on it. Nobody fucked with her. That was a Black professor, scholar that informed Black, radical theory. She wasn't like kicking it with Robin, D.G. Kelly, for example. And then she just started to teach white people and, became a millionaire off that work. Fine. I don't care. Where are the hordes of white people fighting for racism that came out of it? Do you know where they are? Is it just because I'm not in the group chats? Realistically, right? The only thing that moves the needle is having meaningful relationships to Black people, right? That develops the Black sensibility. A white sensibility is why we're sort of here. It's not white people. It's a white sensibility. It's whiteness. It's very self-obsessed. So pause. And we're going to remember this is, but I bet you're with me. Okay. So now go to this moment like last week where I've been like, why am I struggling? Why, like my brain keeps going back to trans people. My brain keeps going back to white trans people, specifically white trans women. Not trans women of color, not even in the slightest, specifically white trans women and specifically white queer people. And I realized something, right? When my brain recognizes something and I can't figure out what's going on, I can't let it go. But of course I have to check all of my shit. Like, am I developing a bias? And I realized what's been fucking bothering me. I found it odd that, because we've gone through, and of course they're white, and so there's that. But I have found it odd that the entire liberal apparatus absolutely bent the knee to white trans people and white non-binary people. It's bothered me, and then I realized what it is. They're just liberals too. They're just liberals too. You don't have any Black friends. You don't organize. You critique and do nothing, and you're miserable. And you're overwhelmed by what's happening, and you have an absolute incuriosity for anything that doesn't impact you. And I want to be clear that that's how I'm going to be approaching this from now on. Do you know who's not a white liberal? I want to be really clear. It's the people out in Minneapolis who leave their fucking homes and risk their goddamn lives. I don't care if you fuck up on shit on race. You're going to. You've never been taught about it. We're going to betray each other. But my God, the trying is all that matters to me. It's the only thing that's ever mattered to me. Because in doing, you learn. Somebody said to me once, I felt so stupid after they said it was so obvious, I was nervous to try boxing. And I said, maybe I got to get in shape to do it. And this guy says to me, you don't get in shape to train. You get in shape by training. And I was like, right, duh. Yeah. We don't need to sit and talk about race. And also, we've spent the last 15 years learning about it. What has moved, right? From all of these movement activations, we have more understanding of race, sexuality, and gender, and have done nothing with it meaningful. Because it was never about the understanding that just comes from sitting and talking especially when you're just self-flagellating so much of the time, right? While other people self-aggrandize. That's liberal logic. That's not white logic, to be clear. That's liberal logic, right? This idea that, well, I care. I don't have to do anything about caring, but it's not about your beliefs, it's about the results of your beliefs. And then I realized something, right? Because I was like, well, how do we approach learning about racism in the 21st century? Because you go back to MLK and how he started to shift his perspective, right? What was his perspective? He started to shift and realize that liberalism, and white liberals in particular, were the problem. That the racists were going to racist, but the liberal sort of nihilistic or resentment, and I've not met more resentment anywhere else than in queer and trans communities by white people, because their own rules. You made my blackness social capital while you resented the idea that actual capital should be exchanged, right? And by the way, I'm not interested in your pockets, right? But again, the privilege thing that we all accepted meant that you should be ashamed of it. I don't want you to be ashamed of it. I can't stand poor whites who don't have a black sensibility. They're awful to be around. They're fucking miserable. And also, I like privilege. It's useful to the revolution. What are we all going to do? Split the check when the fucking bill for the revolution comes? No, we're not splitting the bill. Resources are good. Your knowledge is good. The idea that there's some white folks who have had exposure to things like bureaucracy has been an absolute benefit to my life. White people have saved my life as much as black people have, as much as anyone that I've been around that was trying, because that's all it took, is the trying. It is the adoption of a black sensibility, which is a way of understanding the world. It's understanding and having a tolerance and bandwidth for hardship, your own and other people's, right? It's about understanding that there are things that you absolutely shouldn't say, and if you do, you get smacked for it. Is that not what happened with Chris Rock? You know why? Because Chris Rock has a white sensibility. He always has. If you know, you know. Black women have felt some kind of way about it. Black men have been. He's the guy who's running around telling Louis C.K. that he could say nigger and nigga and all this other shit. That's weird to me. Why is that even a conversation? Because you were in a white sensibility. You resent white people for, how you were treated and by going to these, schools or whatever. And white people who are not exposed to black people resent black people for reasons that, some of which are informed by racism, but a lot of is just the contempt that naturally occurs when you're not curious about other people. And again, you're resentful of your own rules, right? We need to care about black people, and white people need to shut up, right? Black people didn't say that. But some of them, internalized. There's a lot of white people. There's a lot of black folks who are white inside, and we all know when we see them. I think some of you do too. When you develop a black sensibility, you can feel it immediately. They all got names like Ocean. You know what I mean? And they only date white women, and then they use their identity to bully their girl into like whatever, right? Because you're not supposed to. Social justice rhetoric, for the record, was never supposed to be used in interpersonal relationships, by the way. If somebody doesn't know or doesn't care to know, they're probably not going to, right? But also, there has to be a connection to the human in the divides, because there's so much that we don't know about each other. And you have to have bandwidth and care and compassion for those betrayals. But essentially, you have to right size them, and you have to have some infrastructure for that. But the ones that work out adopt a black sensibility. I have a friend who is the whitest girl you'll ever meet. She's a comic, right? If you are an OG, actually, if you're an OG, when we started this shit, then you know Alyssa. Alyssa is a blonde-haired white girl, like just the whitest, right? And so American that Edinburgh couldn't deal with her. She's loud and she's gregarious, and She'll run around in bicycle shorts all the time. Like she wears athleisure. And and her blonde hair is long, right? And she's a comic and she's good. Alyssa Poteet, she's great. And her man is like this like 40-something-year-old black dude comedian, right? Who's like a great guy, great comic, great producer, but like is not like loaded. It's so funny because of course, you know, when they walk around, black folks want to be like, here we go. And then they look at him and they're like, well, I don't know if this works where she stole him. Because, you know, he looks like he should be on a Harley. He's a handsome dude, but you know what I'm saying? He's not, they don't fit into the narrative. But what always struck me was her black sensibility. And you want to know where she got that from? Because when she was younger, and she's open about this, by the way. So it's okay that I share this, but when she was younger, she was forcefully institutionalized. And didn't receive proper care because she had, a mental breakdown. And that feeling of powerlessness lent to her having an understanding of powerlessness in every kind of way. And it doesn't matter whether you know it or not. It's like, for example, anyone who lives with me, right? And I have a roommate, he's a white boy. I said, this is by, you know, it's interesting because I want to say by choice, and it actually is by choice. I went feral living on my own. I really shouldn't. I don't want to for a while. But I had to let him know this is a black household because the FBI was already coming in. And that's the thing. This is a black household. If you're in relationships with black people, you must be open to a black sensibility, but a black sensibility is fantastic. I grew up with, there's a difference between poor white people who only grew up with poor whites. They always got ringworm and like scurvy, and then they're weird and racist and they like do incest or whatever. But poor white people who grew up with black people, that's who I grew up with. They're the first motherfuckers to talk about racism. And I don't know if you've ever taught, like, right now I'm just being hit. And this is what I mean when I say I believe that what we're dealing with trans and white people who grew up middle class, hide it, were trained, in, Ivy or sub Ivy league institutions, and they come in and all they do is police language. That's just liberalism. Your identity doesn't preclude you from that. That's why you're so fucking annoying. But that also explains why the apparatus bent around them in a way that it didn't for any racial identity. Right? Not even the Asians. Stop Asian Hate had, the impact of like, I don't know, a gerbil fart. What did they get from that? They didn't even get anything from that. At the same time, their analysis wasn't great. It was like all about representation, but that makes sense because the meaning got reduced, right? Black Lives Matter, not in 2020, the actual movement was fucking phenomenal and intelligent. And even we had dummies. And I learned something from those dummies. I should have seen the connections then on what was coming. Because again, queers who were not around black people, who were not disenfranchised, they went and got educated, and women's studies turned into gender studies, and it sort of blew up. And there's nothing wrong. I love education. It's how they applied it. They operated like white missionaries. They came back and they said, you can't say transsexual. You can't say faggot. You can't say this. You can't say that. And we should have just smacked them. But we didn't. Because we wanted to learn and we actually respected expertise, but they didn't have a black sensibility. They weren't involved in any tradition. And so it just became about deconstruction. Now we don't know how to build shit. That's not true, actually. But as queer, like, what is the measurable impact of queer and trans people of this generation? Outside of like words and the policing of words and political correctness, I think it's really important to be intentional about what we speak. And what we speak about and how we say it. But there's no space for redemption. There's no space for mistakes. It's based in punishment. That's literally Christianity in a way. Because that's because it became an orthodoxy. And ask yourself, for all the attention that trans people got, what did they do with it? Because it's not actually built in a tradition. When you think about, again, and I don't have this isn't a singular. This is our problem, right? That we need to look at. But I've been thinking, I'm like, why did my mind keep straying to these folks as the problem when they don't have, because we've been told, and it is true, generally trans people don't have, but I'm like, but these people had power. And what the fuck did they do with it? Where are all the trans bills? They're slowly getting, and why? Because of Sarah McBride and folks like her. You want to critique power, you don't want to build it. You have an intolerance for mistake, like not even mistake, just anything they consider problematic. And honest to God, I refuse to. I hate performing to liberal audiences as a comedian. It's the worst thing. It's because, and I realized I felt, that you wouldn't hear me say that. Corey's heard me say a million times, I won't do LGBTQ shows. I can't stand them unless I know the people who are putting it on, or I like the folks I'm going on with, because they don't laugh. That's not true. I'm irresistible. But they laugh at the things that are like so tepid, and it's always about gender, unless you're talking about race, because then it's like, oh, you got us. You got us. And it's always got, I actually purposefully don't use that material because the real jokes they get really nervous about. But it doesn't matter. I realized I was dealing with liberalism because liberals don't laugh. Liberals don't have fun. Liberals are nihilistic. It's about sitting there from this like place. Like, let me just give you an example of what I'm talking about. Okay. Like, have you ever okay, I have to tell certain people now, don't talk to me about why you think, I think I mentioned this yesterday. I'm putting a stop, pause. I'm not listening to anyone who wants to tell me what is happening. I have zero interest. You're not informed. Why would it? I don't care what you think, but tell me how you feel about what's happening. Tell me what you're working through. Tell me what you're thinking about, but don't tell me what is happening, because you don't know. Because to reduce it that's what we've all been fed. We've just been fed brain rot. You know what these videos are like? Well, you know what information is that isn't knowledge? It's just information that's getting it's just McDonald's. It's for your brain. It destroys neuroplasticity. I always hated the fact that nuance as a word just sounded so gay and soft, because we actually need it. And the queer and trans folks who actually have adopted a kind of Black sensibility, they're funny, man. They're so fucking funny. And they're good. I love comedy because it puts me in front of normal people. When are you around normal people now? Right? Like, truly, right? If it's not at your job, and I know that we are in a gig economy, it's mostly the airport, right? And we don't talk to people, but in comedy, you do. In comedy, I'm around regular people all the time. And you know what? Regular people think I'm fucking hilarious. It's because their assholes aren't as tight. If you listen to liberals now, nothing is possible. The world is doomed. It's over. And, I just can't right now. Like, I don't know if you're seeing what's going on. I'm like, your bills are paid, right? You don't have student debt. You're inheriting your mom's house, even though you won't talk to her anymore because she said maybe it was a mistake that Obama got elected. Which, by the way, a lot of Black folks are thinking about. And not that it's a mistake, but like, was it worth it? Because Barack had a Black sensibility, but he didn't have, because of, and Michelle too, they Black, but they didn't have a Black agenda. And that's where our lack of power became clear, right? So, but then that's how white liberals are. It lends to nihilism. It lends to futility, which is what ate away at, folks like MLK, because it was like, you're all marching. You've heard me talk. You saw me get my ass beat. You saw all of us get our ass beat, right? You know what we're fighting for. You know why. Why aren't you? What's going on? Like, why aren't things changing? Right? You hate racists. You say that you do, but because they're useless. And That's not white people. That's liberalism. And the queer and trans folks have become the face of modern day liberalism. They're Ivy League or just sub Ivy League educated. They are policing language, but they don't generate discourse. They don't create culture. They try to police what is acceptable and what isn't. They're well informed, but what have they done with what they know? That's what ate him. That's what ate away at him. And it made me think. I was like, you know what? It's true, because I've really struggled with like the baseline, rejection of because I grew up with poor white people too. And I don't know if you've ever talked to a Black person or any poor white person, right? While everybody else is miserable and losing their fucking shit, you ever say hi or, good afternoon, Miss Rachel. How's it going? Oh, you remember Lil Jerome up the way? Well, he stole a Snickers bar from 7-Eleven. And then they charged him as an adult, but you know how they do. And you remember my granddaddy, Reginald? Well, he lost his foot on account of the diabetes, right? He's probably going to lose his leg, but that's all right. And I've got calcium deposits all over my spine because I was chasing Shireen when she was going through my purse. And she knows she's not supposed to be doing that, and my oldest, Chandra, she, she's trying to get custody back of her kids because they called CPS on her because she sent them to school with rotis for lunch. So she's trying to get them back from the system. And, and Jimmy ain't been the same since he came back from service. He screams in his sleep. But we're here. We're blessed. God is good. You say all the time? All the time. There is that's what it's like. Hardship is part of life, but it's not all there is to life. That's what I mean when I say the tradition. It's a very long view. At the same time, as we saw with Ezra, a sense of urgency is demanded and required, and building power. And it was interesting to see, and again, of course, if there was an organizer or a different person, of course, that you would have seen the molding of the two. But Ta-Nehisi is a scholar. He's an academic, and he's not an organizer, and he doesn't need to be. He doesn't need to be on the front lines. He's doing his job. And I will respect him to the end of time, because yes, Between the World of Me was beautifully written. His fiction was rough. I did not enjoy Water Dancer at all. I actually couldn't get through it, but I like that you tried. What I really respect about him is obviously white, like liberals in particular, but I'm not even interested in saying white liberals, but definitely like it's in this case, the context matters. They were obsessed with him. And, at the height of their obsession, he was like, well, we need to talk about reparations. And they fled. They fucking fled. They were gone. Right. By the way, and this posturing isn't white, queer, and white trans people only. It's like, it's spread. They're the folks who, we allowed them, I shouldn't say that they did. We allowed them to disrupt our movement because we didn't know what to do, right? Like there was this thing that was going on because again, it was all about the me and the I and the me and the me and the me, because that's what white sensibility teaches you. That's what education teaches you. Me, I, what I'm going through, right? How hard this is for me. I remember in this train, and this was like the third or fourth convening that I had been to. So that's as many convenings as many years, right? You'd think people are getting smarter, sharper. That was true for those of us who were working and believed in organizing. But there was this person, there was a group of them, but, I think I've mentioned this before, but I mentioned, I was doing a training with Erin Lang, and she's a brilliant Black trans woman. And you were doing a training, everybody in the room is Black, right? But again, queer first, like there's the queer first, right? And what does queer mean, and how does it operate now? And so I said, it is integral to our, anytime we put on events or workshops and trainings, that we secure ASL interpretation, right? It's something that we must care about. And if you need help figuring that out, whatever, this person's like, well, that's respectability politics. And do you remember when I mentioned how there's all the things, just, well, in this case, the only thing that I was hitting against my brain was, this is a dummy. But I was like, it's okay. You don't have to know things. So I said, I explained what respectability politics meant. And I realized immediately by this person's response that it wasn't really about the language at all. It was really just the rejection that they should have to do more work. You know what? If you can't figure out, do you know how many ASL interpreters throw down for free? And then you give them something anyway? If you can't figure that out, you're not a good organizer. You should leave. You'd have no interest in this. But I couldn't say that. I should have, actually, at the time. I'm no longer going to allow us to be bullied by the worst actors. But again, there was this thing that we were trying to hold, which was, if society and the state and doesn't care about you and there's systemic oppression, right, then we should make space for your emotional needs. Not at the expense of the fucking agenda. Nope, not anymore. They derailed every fucking thing. And a couple of them actually were infiltrators. We found out later, but whatever. Whether they were or not, they were doing the same work, which is disruption and hyper-fixation on the self, and that my needs supersede the needs of everybody else, right? Because it's not even about the people in the room, in the convening. We were all in our communities organizing. In fact, it was so funny. A couple of them went over to Patrice, because I'm beloved, but I'm also I'm hated. So like, it doesn't interest me. It's always people's insecurities, because I can give you legitimate reasons to detest me. You get to know me, but I guess. But they ran over to Patrice and they're just like, Future, is clearly elitist and didn't grow up hood, and that was the language that they were using at the time, right? You didn't grow up hood. That was. And Patrice and a couple of people around just fucking laughed their asses off, because the scar I got on my forehead, I hit the fucking mic with my face. Sorry if it was loud, but the scar I got on my forehead is literally from a fight that I had when a lock got smashed in my face and split open. Like, I had so many court dates, because the charges that I had for fighting and whatever. I didn't graduate on time, right? I don't even need to. This is the thing: I'm not interested in the performance, because for as difficult as my life was, by certain measurements, I always had just enough. Like, there was always somebody that gave me and offered me something, even if they didn't know that they were doing it. Because if you are looking and you want and you're trying, then you're seeing how people move in a completely different way. But it was interesting to see what they used to try to reject what I was saying, right? Because another person who, in better faith, that was just like, well, I just don't understand why we have to read. Like, you're talking about reading, and that's just not accessible. And we want to do things more like the Panthers. And I said, the Panthers had Fanon as required reading. Political education was a part of it. Well, there were other things. The nation. I was like, the nation demanded interpretation and engagement with scripture. Like, you had to read the Quran. They had niggas reading from prison. That's where they found Malcolm. You don't know what you're talking about. But even then, there was this I can say generously, this misunderstanding, but this antagonism towards expertise, because everything should be mine and I should have access to all of this right now. And I'm the same as you. You're not better than me. Because do your fucking time, dude. Do your 10,000 fucking hours like everybody else and every other thing. But we just started to believe that certain things weren't craft. Like you didn't have to try. That you being there was enough. And it's true. That's for showing up. But in trying, you will learn. always that you get your 10,000 hours by trying, not by talking, not by posturing, and certainly not by rejecting people and who they are and what they know in the room based on what they look like. The reality of our rejection of that is all around us. We have become inept, but boy, do we know words, but we don't even know the meaning of them anymore. They're not being applied appropriately. Like there were folks who were angry. You know, Mamdani raised the minimum wage for food delivery folks or something. Because I'm not directly engaging with it, you know, but I'll pull it up on my phone later. Or I don't want to do it right now because I'm so much of this is anecdotal, and I don't want to go off. And Corey will keep me honest because we have to move into these clips. I did a time check. I'm trying to be less, you know, whatever. But there's you know, it was, I don't know, he raised this like $20, $21, $22. And there's a bunch of people who are just like, this is ableist. And I was like, what the fuck are we doing? People getting a livable wage is ableist because you can't get, but the problem is that people shouldn't have to get paid less, or their quality of life shouldn't be reduced to meet you where you're at. We have to raise where you're at. We stopped fighting for every kind of disabled person. And for the record, for all that these liberals, and again, I'm mainly talking about queer and trans liberals because that's what they are. That's what they are. Again, white folks are out here risking life and fucking limb. Those aren't fucking liberals. I don't care how they voted. I believe in changing your mind. I believe in trying. I know that they would risk their life for me if I was out there. Right? That's all it takes for me. That's enough. I can work with that. You don't even want to be marginally inconvenienced. And you resent Black people based on your own fucking rules. You made it social capital, but that's because you wanted to benefit from it. And then you made sure that you did, right? So you could get your follower count up. But what did we do for trans rights? But yap, what did you do? But yap about it. Did you connect it to anything else? I'm not even joking. There's several white trans women that very much are, you know, in the political world. They've never talked about a single other thing. It was a shock, I'm sure, to suddenly be in the world as a bitch. It is rough for women in every conceivable way. But bitch, it's been 8 years. Talk about anything else. Aren't you a little bit curious at all about anything? But they don't want to deal with race because that's not about me. Meanwhile, I wish it was anything but, because to be Black and to know, and every Black person feels this in their motherfucking soul, because to be educated and part of the tradition and to know that it comes back to what this country has done to Black people, it comes down to anti-Black racism. You're like, just fucking kill me. I don't want to it's so, you want it to be anything else. You want it to be anything else. What did I say it was? It's like being in Costco and you're trying to sell the cell phone plan and everybody just wants their donuts and their massive quantities of paper towels. And here you are talking about how they could save a couple of bucks, right? But in the avoidance, the racists took over because they have no problem talking about race, except they're the most uneducated, you know. And we all know stupidity lends to cruelty. Anywhere else in the West, for the most part, every racist is understood to be a stupid person, an anti-intellectual, and are dealt with appropriately, right? But it's the me and the I. Well, the problem with that is the other side gets it too, but they'll do it better because they're also entitled, right? Here's my new rule, by the way, how we're going to approach this race thing. I'm going to do all the education stuff, but I don't care if people know about racism or not, who don't need to know or don't want to know. I don't give a fuck. We have not moved the needle in 15 fucking years. And all people have done supposedly is read about race and go to the little workshops. You know what's going to happen? I don't need it. I don't need everybody to know. We have to put the people who do take racism seriously in power. That's how Black folks did it, right? They spent, white racists and regular white people spent more time. Reconstruction was about 10 years when they said, oh shit, Black people have literally made this country rich. We should do something about it. you got to give it back. And Black folks were advocating. They didn't want us to read. Do you remember that? Now everybody's just anti fucking literature. It's embarrassing, but anyway, anti-intellectual and masquerading because it's elitist. No, not elitist to be fucking smart. You're just stupid. That's how stupid people think. I spent most of my childhood and most of my teenagers, I thought I was stupid. I believed that I was stupid. It was through, I discovered it in piecemeal, it was the teachers who were trying to help me, because I wrote half of an essay and they saw that it was a clearly articulated thesis, or because I did well on my, there's a standardized reading test or literacy test. And I guess I did well on that. And suddenly it was like, whoa, but I knew it also, I could tell even then, like, because I was difficult. I had a lot of attitude, the normal things that, and also I was difficult because my circumstances were, hold on, let me just have a bit of water. But I knew that I was considered savable in a way that some of my girlfriends, the other little light-skinned Black girls running around causing trouble, were not considered interesting enough. I noticed it then, and yeah, their circumstances were less volatile than mine at home, but they're still volatile. And that because I was smart, because suddenly I started to be understood as smart, and I'm sure also because of the way that I looked, which is confusing because at the time I was also very certain that I was ugly because I'd been told that I was stupid and ugly, pretty much since I arrived. With the bad hair and all the other things. So I'm very empathetic to feelings of worthlessness, but I'm no longer, I can't indulge people who couch their insecurity in social justice rhetoric. You're a cosplayer, and we have to reject that. So from here on in, we don't need to educate people who don't want to know about racism, but the people who care about it, that's who we have to put in power. That's going to be part of our leadership because they just go with whatever is the culture anyway. And our concentration of light when we find each other is going to be so fucking bright. Everybody's quality of life will be better. To me, that's a vision worth fighting for. And it's not identity. Again, you've heard me say this a million times, and I believe it even now. And I will believe it to the day I die. Identity can and should be, maybe even should be your entry point into consciousness, into activism, but it shouldn't be your exit point. It should be a belief system. And it just, all it does is, the Black sensibility is literally just being a normal fucking person that thinks about and cares about things that aren't just about you. Since Corey and I've been working together, because I've known him for years, personal life shit has happened. That my mother's passed, and there's a systemic, reason why I couldn't go home, and I still can't really talk about it. And in that time, some of his family members have been going through things, and he's had similar experiences, and that's just what it means to be Black. You just have to hold all of it. That's what a sensibility is. You're not the most important thing. Sorry, I wrote something. There's an identity, and with the clips, there's Corey, can we please pull up the clip of the white woman in Minneapolis who was moved to act?
My husband is in there somewhere. Like, we were at home, in our posh home in Edina, and we were watching the news and learned that there was another shooting here. And we were just like, I can't stand this anymore. I can't stand what's happening here. So we came out immediately. And we were here after a lot of the folks were getting pulled out and tear gas and can't see out of their own eyes because they're literally blinded by the chemicals. And so I was helping people back there, and I happened across this woman. I don't know where she is now, but she was having a panic attack. She was in the moment of having a panic attack. And I walked up and I gave her a huge hug, and I just said to her, I said, we got this. This is when we show our resolve as a city, because we're better than this. We are under attack by this administration right now, and this is not okay. It's just not. I'm a 55-year-old woman who lives in Edina, and I have to come in here and tell the world, like, we have to change this. This is not okay for our city. You know, I believe that the Twin Cities represents the best of America on a fundamental level.
Talk
Well,
your shit. Let's go.
Because we represent this idea of embracing others from other places. I mean, there are 160 different nationalities that live in this city because, you know, there's a lot of refugee programs that are based out of this city. We invite them in because we know that they belong here, that they're welcomed here. This is about attacking the fundamental principles of our country right now. We are one country, regardless of where we come from. We're all immigrants and we're sitting on native land.
All right. Preach. But okay. And, you know, I understand. I really understand. Because I've seen this, right? There's been a lot of white people online who are just like, I've never seen, I just can't believe that people in masks are abducting citizens on the street. This has never happened in America before. And of course, black people are like, but we've never stopped fighting. We've never stopped fighting for people's rights. But this is what matters more to me, right? The person who's writing that stupid thing is not on the street. That's the problem. If you have time to write the stupid thing, and again, I don't care if you say the stupid thing. It doesn't, I just don't understand what anyone expects. You have one of the worst educational systems in the quote unquote developed world in the world. Like nothing here is good when it comes to teaching intelligent history. I didn't get great history in Canada. I didn't learn about fucking blackness. You know what I mean? There comes a point where, yes, you have to take responsibility and ownership for what you don't know and what you don't know. But why, like, I'm going to make the story irresistible and the people who come will come, but I don't have the time or the interest in punishing people for what they didn't know before. What good is that? What the fuck does that matter? If you're actually engaged in meaningful work and in community, you don't feel the need to do that. You just don't. I understand, right? And of course, and you know, most leftists would be like, oh, you know, the American, here we go. And I'm like, that's the problem. You know, in the liberal world, you take accountability for nothing. There's no accountability for anything. Racists have a belief system and they fight for it all the time. They use religion, everything else, but right now we know when it's too concentrated, especially, we know it's just naked evil, right? I don't care if you believe what you believe, but if you have power to make it real and make it my reality, we have a fucking problem, right? So they did that and they're concentrated and they're disgusting and they're gross. The best that liberals will do is like, well, I don't talk to my mom anymore. You know how many homophobes, you know, or homophobic people are in black families? They still talk, like, you got to go home, like, because there's nuance. And there's nothing wrong with the boundaries or whatever, but even the way boundaries are applied is like, this is me and I'm not okay with this and I'm drawing the line. Boundaries aren't meant to keep people out. They're meant to keep both of you or all of you in the culture of care that you created together. It's not a fucking line that you draw in the sand that people have to now bend to your whim and your fucking needs. Shut up. I don't know. But mainly, I think we all approach this with, if you take nothing else from this, from, you know, this thought experiment that I'm doing, is that we don't actually need to teach people about racism anymore, right? Like, I'm not going to sit there and say, and this woman, and when she said this, and when she said that, and, you know, da-da-da-da-da. No. Her passion is all that matters to me. And what I'm going to do, though, is help normalize a Black sensibility. because that's part of the Black radical tradition, and that she was moved to action is a Black sensibility. I had to leave my house. The people who aren't moved to that are the ones we have to watch out for. And again, it's the leave your house is a metaphor, right? And you want to know why I'm correct? Look how fast white people became experts on ADHD and autism for themselves. Look how fast white, queer, and trans people adopted an entirely new fucking personality and lexicon, right? And by the way, it didn't do anything for neurodivergent people who had been struggling their whole lives with it, right? Not a fucking thing. Didn't protect Section 504 when that got gutted. There was the direct result of Black and disabled people organizing together, and specifically Black disabled people. I'm talking about Brandon, who was part of the Black Panthers, who led that action, right? That's a Black sensibility. And the folks, there are more people who have it than who don't. And it's just a Black sensibility because that's America. You've made it so that anti-Black racism is the bedrock of American society. And again, really, American language and its belief about itself was stolen from Indigenous people. We're talking about English folks who left England. They weren't the fucking best. They were the losers, right? And some people who were just ambitious and weird. And they got on this fucking boat and they came here. What do you think was happening in England at the time? Everybody was a bunch of fucking dirty, they were wearing dirty tights all the time, and they were fucking zealots. They were religious zealots. White people were so bored that they were having wars about what kind of Catholic or Christian you were. What the fuck is that? Right? But look at Irish people have what? A Black sensibility, right? A Black sensibility. They were fighting against oppression. It develops that. You develop that. You hear a real Irish person talk, they have a zero tolerance policy for any kind of fucking racism whatsoever. And they'll fucking fight about it. And they headbutt. I learned that from them. If you street fight dirty. But it's about the sensibilities. But they came here, and so it was a monarchy. There's no freedom here. They stole that from Indigenous people. The concept of free to pursue and a freedom of self, that's all stolen from Indigenous people. Again, stolen land and stolen labor. Not stolen land versus stolen labor, but we barely talk about that. Because in the liberal imagination, Indigenous people are just what? Mythical. I saw it when we were all when I was out in Standing Rock, and I was part of the Red Warrior Camp, which is the active arm of they came for a fucking Burning Man. And what happened? We do what? We do land acknowledgements, but did we give land back? Did we have the power to do that? But look what Sheinbaum is doing in Mexico. If we put the right people in power, our vision of a better world becomes a reality. We have to do that and let the better life do the talking for us. But the work of we approach this with, we have to teach people about this because they have to buy in. They don't have to buy in. We don't need them to buy in to the hardest parts because they're not interested, and we don't need everyone to be a fucking expert. What we need is 25% buy-in. So we speak to those 25% needs. What do I mean when I say, first of all, Corey, let's hit the Jane Fonda clip, because the other thing that I do want to say, though, is whites in general, you all just do not take racism seriously enough. I don't want you shutting people out of your life. I think that's very silly unless they're like weird and dogged about their racism. But because again, you're doing the me in the eye, right? How hearing this makes me feel. You're not like, why are you taking personal responsibility? Right? And at the same time, it's because white liberals and queers in particular made a rule, right? Listen to Black people, all of us. Herschel, Hakeem, all of us. Expertise. Who's in the tradition? Who knows, right? Who's not interested in the, pedantic nonsense? Let's. By the way, to be clear, Jane is still fighting. Let's pull her up.
I didn't know racism until I went to Greenwich. That was the first time I ever heard the N-word, and I repeated the N-word once, and the only time in his life that my dad's whacked me.
Pause. She's talking to, I should have said this, she's talking to Kerry Washington, and you're about to hear Kerry Washington be like, you should have seen Kerry's beautiful, gorgeous face. Her eyes was like when Jane said, he whacked me. Go on, let's get it.
He said, don't you ever, ever say that word again.
Now listen to why.
My dad grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. His father, my grandfather, who I never knew, had a printing press that looked down over a central plaza, a square in Omaha. And he made my father stand there and watch when a black man was taken out of the sheriff's office and hung, and then dragged behind a truck around the square. And it had a huge impact on my father. He cared about justice and he hated racism. And, you know, with that slap, he taught me to pay attention.
You know, there are some things that are so serious and so wrong that there does have to be a kind of intolerance for it. There are some things that are so stupid and evil that we have to develop an intolerance for, but that's not about policing. It's literally about marginalizing them. The only reason they got power is because, you know, the internet. Otherwise, we did. But even still, there was this liberalism. But again, that's not white people. That's not white people. Liberalism is not, it's like whiteness is this white sensibility, right? You know, I study rhetoric, rhetorical traditions, lecture. That's the Aristotle. That's Aristotle, right? That's Aristotle. Sorry, but that's that. I'm lecturing at you. You listen. I'm telling you what the problems are. I'm telling you what you need to do. The African American, that's what they call it in schools, but the African American rhetorical tradition is call and response. That's why it's amen. Mm-hmm. That's right. I know that's right. It is active buy-in. It's collaborative. It has to be, which is why Black audiences are both my favorite and scariest, because the stakes feel so real, because Black folks are honest. They're gonna, as long as you're trying, as long as you show that you're not wasting their fucking money, you're good. You don't even have to be an amazing comic, but you got to try. And failure is okay. Why do you think they all do? What have you started to notice, right? With the sincerity. Who's starting that? Right. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, here comes the Washington Post talking about Black people are experiencing, shorter lifespans because of stress and inflammation. Well, yeah, because that's what racism does. Why do you think on SNL, right, they have a bit with Colin and Marcella, who I really love. I like what they're trying to do. But why do you think they were talking about, all Gen Z slang is AAV. It's all African American vernacular. It's all Black slang. Black people generate discourse. But like, don't you see that what I'm saying is like all the trends are just happening again and again and again. And it's this idea that we're going to come and save you. But while there's an intolerance for actual Black progress, because every time that's been happening in the face of white people, even again, liberals, right? We're proponents of desegregation. We want it. We want desegregation, but then took all their kids out of the schools where Black kids were. Well, because they didn't want right? But the ones who stayed, I can always tell when white people have a Black sensibility. There's an ease, there's a freedom. They look better, like dress better, like, you can see online, there's glow ups that happen. But mainly they're happier. They're happier people. It's a lot easier to be in the world as a human being when you're not hyper focused on everything that is wrong with people and everything that is wrong with the world. Because who has seen the worst of it in a contemporary sense in the last 500 years more consistently than Black people and Indigenous people all over the world? If they give in to nihilism, what's left? We talk about, we're afraid of the apocalypse. For Indigenous people, the apocalypse already happened. And they're still here. So they don't get to fantasize about the worst things and the worst people because they've lived through it every single day. And yet I'm embraced in community. When I went out to Six Nations territory, I was met with like care. They taught me, how to grow food and how to work the land. And it was a short thing. And when we did our occupation of the police headquarters, in Toronto in the middle of February, it was stolen land versus, I'm sorry, it was, we talked about, Black Lives Matter on Indigenous land. We brought the things together, and every Valentine's Day, there's a missing and murdered women's action that happens in Toronto. But just to give you how, everyone's like, well, ICE, and they're beating people up and they're throwing them out on the street. Yeah, in Canada, that was called Starlight Tours, where they take Indigenous folks who were either, drinking or not drinking. It didn't really matter. We all know why that happens. When in Canada, you have something where the suicide rate is between 70 and 7 years old. Look it up. That's post-apocalypse, right? There's no running water, no irrigation systems. And so, yes, everything comes from the Black and Indigenous. That's the blueprint. What would it look like if we did it differently? What would it look like if we weren't so obsessed with identity? When I was out in Buenaventura, and I'll end here. But I want to leave you with a clip of what it looks like to just be normal about this shit. So again, it was a worker strike. In Colombia, the port in Buenaventura subsidizes the entire country, but it has one of the highest poverty rates. It has, the highest poverty rate and a very high unemployment rate. Both of those communities were working together because there was a single road that goes in direct from the port that all these 18-wheelers just back to back, like literally they just cut through neighborhoods. They just cut through a village. So to cross, I have to Frogger, I have to move through 18-wheelers like that. Imagine the exhaust fumes every day. So that was happening for the Black folks there. Much of their infrastructure was piles of garbage that was floating on the ocean. Because there was a gulf that was protected. There was a collection of trees. And when they showed me the water, like where their drinking water was from, it was a pipe that came, it wasn't a pipe. It was a rubber tube that is about as wide as my pinky finger, that just pumped water out all day. And they would all line up to get it there. And the Indigenous people were more inland, right? The population of folks that I was talking to. And I asked them, because in America it was like, Black capital, stolen land versus stolen labor, and which one's more important, and whether or not we should own land. And I said, how do you navigate that? And they looked at me like I was crazy because my question didn't make sense. And they said, we work together to keep the land away from the government that would destroy it. There wasn't identitarian bullshit. Only we could be pampered enough to have just enough as a collective. So that is liberalism. The idea that you can just play with language and that's enough, that you could judge from the rafters. Oh, fuck off. That you can be like, that term is problematic. I don't give a fuck, honest to God. Everybody who does amazing work is problematic. Everybody is. Oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing. You already have. Nobody died. Make amends. Fix it. Get fucking better. Okay, now I'm just going on the right. To give you an example, right, of what I mean when I say it's when you actually have relationships with Black people or you have a Black sensibility, you're just normal. You're just normal. Tom Segura, who I like as a comedian, does not have a Black sensibility, but he's very close friends with Bert Kreischer. Bert Kreischer has 1,000% of Black sensibility, and you can hear it in the way that they are. Why don't we? Bert Kreischer was talking to Shannon Sharp, who's the uncle with the biggest show in the uncledom, and he's Black. You'll hear it in his voice immediately. And why don't you hear about how he talks about race? Bert is 26 years old. It's his birthday, and this might come up, but his father is talking to him, and so his father's in this image. Okay, now we can go.
You are a tremendous piece of shit. I go, what? And he goes, you are a failure. You're a liar. You say you want to be a stand-up and you're not doing shit to pursue your career. He goes, I just perjured myself in court. I was in court and the judge said, Al, how's your son doing? And I said, great. I lied. The first time in my life in court, I lied because I couldn't tell him, you know what, Your Honor? He has no humility. He's never going to amount to anything because I fucked him up as a father. I didn't teach him how to be a humble man. And now he's in New York and he's a party boy. And he goes, and you know what? Fine, be a party boy. And I was like, I remember going, it's my birthday. And he goes, I know what day it is. And he broke me off. He broke me off. And I said to him, I was like, I'm sitting up. I'm in my underwear. I'm like, there's a part of me that wants to push back and fight him for it and go, hey, I'm doing shit, but I'm lying.
Exactly.
That. And then the other part of me is just as a kid talking to his dad, I go, how can I fix it? And he goes, you can't. He goes, I f***ed you up. I never had you get a job in a warehouse and work around men that need to struggle. That's men that struggle. He goes, I f***ed you up. I made life easy for you. I'm paying your rent up there. You're going to be a party boy the rest of your life. Don't worry, I'll pay for it. Just be a party boy. He kept saying party boy. I was like, stop saying party boy. And then I said, hey, how would I fix it? Tell me how to fix it. And he goes, I'll tell you, but I don't think you're capable of it. And he told me, he goes, go to that club tonight that you've been going to and tell them you want a job there sweeping up or that you'll do anything. And then
pay attention.
Hopes that one day you can do stand-up. And I remember going, Dad, that's not how it works. He goes, it's not how it works for you because you're a privileged white kid from Florida. But if there's some black kid in Harlem who wants a job, he's going down there, hat in hand, he's saying, how do I get on this stage? And he goes, it doesn't work for you that way because you've never had to work for anything. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I remember saying,
actually, you know what? In the interest of time, Corey, that's the pivotal part. Do you see? And he ends up going to the club, and the guy tells him, "No, what are you weird? No, what the fuck am I going to do with you?" He calls his dad. He said, "See, it didn't work." His dad says, "Go back, go back." He goes back and he says, "I'm not leaving till you give me something," and he gets something, right? And that's it. Do you see how easy that was? It wasn't like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm ashamed. And you want to know why? Because he's not a fucking liberal. He's just a guy with a black sensibility because he spends time with other people and he approaches comedy the right way, which is, and that doesn't mean he doesn't tell jokes that are quote unquote problematic, but they're not interrogating something, questioning something, or even affirming something that already exists is not inherently problematic to me. Not engaging with it actively is. Not telling a better story is. And there's power structures and that matter. But again, that requires a power analysis. And we just keep reducing till it's about punishing somebody's singular work. Do you know that's actually why we changed the language? It's not patriarchy, it's toxic masculinity, because then I can indict you for it. Right? It's not racism, it's cultural appropriation, because then I can indict you for it. Right. That's why those, and then the actual power analysis, things that we should actually be focusing on and changing, that became uninteresting. And I knew we'd really lost the fucking plot when everybody tried to go after Angela Davis, when she was like, Kamala is a better opponent, right? And it was a bunch of, and see, what the fuck have you ever risked in your goddamn life? What service do you do? I can reference the books that she's written, the fact that she was facing her entire life in prison in solitary confinement, which is where they put the rest of the Black Panthers. She actually wasn't. She was part of the Communist Party. But, the fact that it's Angela's face that's spray painted on walls in fucking Palestine. There is absolutely zero, because we're so, because you feel like you're right. I don't understand that. We don't do that. That's why every Black person refers to elders or whoever as miss something. There's just some things that are just about a sensibility. And by the way, I'll leave you with this. This is this funny story of Angela Davis, Angela Yvonne Davis, Dr. Angela Yvonne Davis. But she's married to her partner is Gina Dent, who's also a brilliant Black woman scholar, and they've been together for a long time. Some of you might not remember this story, but it makes me laugh every time. So we were on a panel together, and we were headed towards it. And, Patrice was driving, which is kind of funny because then you got me and Patrice, who's like the co-founder of Black Lives Matter. And then you have, it's a car. It's a car. And Patrice is driving and I'm sitting in the back with Gina. And, Angela's in the passenger seat. And so we're at a light and we're in the left-hand lane and it's our go, but there's a car in front of us that clearly, and Angela Davis gets out of the car and she closes the door and walks around. And as she's walking, Gina's like, oh, here we go. She always does this. I can't. Like, it was such a human moment. And Angela goes and walks in front of the vehicle that we're in and then knocks on the window of the driver in front of us. And it's just like, you're allowed to go. You can go now. No, you can go. And then gets back in the car. And I was like, the work is never done for you. You know what I mean? The work is never done. It's the helpers. It's always been the helpers. And it doesn't matter when the moment awakens in you. It's the right one and you've got to keep it. Because final thought, every person is born a progressive. Every child in the universe is born believing in fairness, believing in equality. If you ever try to give one kid water and everybody else got apple juice, you've got a revolution on your hands in that class. They respond purely. It's what we allow that warps people. Everybody is a progressive when they're born. We all are. And we allowed conservatism to masquerade as something else, and we allowed liberalism to masquerade as. So fuck these political ideologies. Let's get our power. Let's make our vision, our belief system the normal one. Let the good life, let the better life do the talking for us. If you know and you want to know, you're always welcome. But we no longer need to do this thing where we gotta get in shape to train. The second that you're out here on the streets, the second that you're activated, the second that you approach things with curiosity, with an open heart, not with certainty and fucking words and nihilism, we're part of the same movement. And you know what? Even for the people who don't, I might not care for you, but I care about you. Because I still want you eating good. The implications of you not are too great. And I've never really met Americans. I don't think I've ever really met them, because if your quality of life is so poor across the board all the time, I wasn't my best self when I was struggling. I wasn't my best self when I was hungry, when I felt like I was worthless and nobody gave a damn about me. I had to talk back to it. And thank God I did, but I think it was because I was part of a Black sensibility. Anyway, that's what reading gave me. It gave me a sense of time. There were things that happened before and after me because I was reading prolifically and obsessively, at 8, and it never stopped. It let me know that there was love, and all I had to do was find it. And it helped me to recognize the way that love was being introduced to me in all these different ways. It was my mom who taught me a love of literature. And that's why I'm such a champion. My mom wasn't a good mother by any normal metric. She couldn't be. But she was a phenomenal woman, and she loved me and my siblings ferociously. And for that, I got to redefine what motherhood was. And I'll always love her for it. I don't regret the way that I grew up. I don't regret a thing. So I'll leave you all with that. Thank you for being a part of this weird thought experiment. We'll talk about the facts later, but I think there's something in our approach that has to be different. We can't keep doing the same fucking cycle of punishment, punishing ourselves, punishing each other. I'm not interested in that. I just think it's very stupid. You want people to know more? Great. Create better education systems. Make the curriculum, write the things. There are always people who want to read them. So I love you all very much. Thank you, Corey, for making us look good, sound good. We changed the lighting. I'm less light-skinned now slightly, so that's good. I doubt there's going to be a single clippable thing in this. Who knows? Sorry, Corey, in advance. It was mostly just musings and rants. all we got to do is trust each other 25%. Next episode, I'll tell you the story of where that comes from if you don't know. And I can't wait until then. So make your shit, talk your shit. Don't just consume, create. Information is not useful. Knowledge is. And in knowledge, there's always space for you. It's not interesting without you there. That's what knowledge is. Can't wait for the next episode of Dark World. Love you.